my name is Uni Patel. The affirmative opposes to resolve the federal government in the United States by adopting a federal jobs guarantee. We will do so by increasing standards for low-income immigrant populations through a program that ensures stable employment with a federal jobs guarantee funded by fiscally redistributed policies. First, we will define some terms. The United States federal government, system of government as defined in the Constitution, which is based on the separation of powers among three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Fiscal redistribution, a program that will provide government-funded employment to citizens. Federal jobs guarantee, a program that will provide government-funded employment to citizens. Fiscal redistribution, allocation of taxes and transfers to advance income equality. Federal poverty level, for an individual, the poverty level is 14,580, HHS.gov. Involuntary unemployment, having no job out of force but actively seeking one, Migration Policy Institute. Low income, when a family's average income is 200% below the federal poverty level, Migration Policy Institute. Immigrant, people migrating to the USA, including green card holders, citizens, and refugees, Migration Policy Institute. Substantial, of considerable importance, size, or worth, Cambridge. A 35% increase in employment from low-income immigrants, projected increase for fiscal redistribution. Status quo. The United States of America is a country that was founded based on immigration. It has become not only a melting pot of various cultures, but is considered a safe haven for outsiders to reestablish their lives and chase the American dream. Nevertheless, the system needs to be more fair to everyone, but currently there is much aggression and xenophobia towards immigrant populations. 22% of migrants are employed in private households and subjected to 12-hour shifts, no overtime pay, and sexual assault, among other forms of abuse. This is only one example. University of Chicago. Ultimately, out of the more than 45 million immigrants in the United States, approximately one-third, 14.8 million, are low-income, and of that, 9.4 million are documented. In a broader context, out of the 40 million people within the American low-income population, 37% are immigrants. Currently, 4.9 million low-income immigrants are actively looking for employment. This includes 1.3 million refugees, Migration Policy Institute. Evidence supports that immigrants are more prone to psychological distress due to the transition from their home country to an entirely new one. Specifically, these trends include concerns about socioeconomic status, family safety and loss, discrimination, acculturation, and language barriers. National Library of Medicine. In addition to existing difficulties, English proficiency issues are a big concern, as one-third of the immigrant population is not proficient. Working age limited English proficiency, or LEP adults, are 25 to 40% less than their English proficient counterparts, and only 15% hold a college degree. LEP workers also concentrate in low-paying jobs within this institution. Additionally, some immigrants encounter difficulties in having their education recognized, which compromises their ability to find work equal to their educational level, leading them to feel overqualified for their jobs. National Library of Medicine and KFF. After considering their hardships, a clear line of reasoning between immigration and poverty has been delineated. And due to this, immigrants who face discrimination in the workforce are forced into minimum wage jobs that are insufficient to support themselves and their family. When examining past precedents, the 1978 Full Employment and Growth Act tried to focus on leveling pricing and providing opportunities, but was futile in increasing employment rates, as it only tried to regulate inflation rather than providing job opportunities, and unemployment rose from 7% to 10%. Federal Reserve history. Additionally, the immigrant population has increased from 40 to 45 million over the past decade. Migration Policy Institute. The influx of immigrants in the status quo conveys a greater need for assistance corresponding to their value in the U.S. population. Even after witnessing these various harms and past legal precedents, the U.S. federal government is not pursuing any endeavors, let alone a federal jobs guarantee targeting a specific group and nuanced factors that restrict them from excelling in society. Short-term solutions within the existing welfare policies, including TANF and Social Security, do not create a strong employment security net as would a federal jobs guarantee. In fact, TANF has perpetuated deep poverty even further and does not address the root cause, long-term unemployment. Center on budget and policy priorities. As a result, the inherency of this issue is clear. Suppose these numbers are kept exactly the way they are. In that case, our population will be subjected to more cyclical inequity towards immigrants, especially considering the ineffective U.S. welfare policies previously mentioned. In order to break the cycle of poverty in immigrant communities, we must address their education, their children's education, and the opportunity to provide higher quality jobs for both generations. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of our country and our citizens to uphold the American dream and provide an equal pathway to success and opportunity for advancement in socioeconomic status, which ultimately leads to an improved economy for our country as a whole. These harms and deficiency in the status quo bring us to an overview of the affirmative plan of action. We propose to create a low-income immigrant employment Guarantee Program, or LEACH. The purpose of this program is for applicants to achieve full-time employment, projecting a 35% increase over 5 years. However, the program will extend beyond 5 years. This federal jobs guarantee will allow any documented low-income immigrant adult to find work through a federally funded employment program using funds from the Department of Defense and executive branch. After an online application process, this program will allow any documented low-income immigrant who suffers from involuntary unemployment to receive a federally funded private sector job. With our program, all participants will have access to solid wages indexed to inflation, raises, and a private benefits package funded by the United States government but facilitated by the Department of Labor and private sector companies on a rolling basis. Additionally, after a training period, participants will be placed in fields with an extreme lack of workers, including but not limited to manufacturing, transportation, mining and logging, wholesale trade, construction and infrastructure, retail trade, and healthcare and social assistance. Seattle Times. The second constructive will address a detailed budget for this program, as well as a rolling timeline and necessary logistics. In the end, the work experience on this program serves as a stepping stone to potentially alleviate involuntary unemployment, resulting in positive changes to household income, wealth distribution, and overall quality of life. To summarize, this program will provide an opportunity for generational education rather than the indulgence of time spent working that results in minimal fiscal return. We have to acknowledge that the program is a chain reaction for fiscal redistribution, or based on the transfer of resources, which would be furthered in constructive too. Transferring resources from the Defense Department to LEACH will stimulate fiscal redistribution as it shifts the production possibilities curve. The maximum amount that defense contractors can produce will decrease, so that the maximum amount that the industry's gaining immigrant employees produce will increase. This is clear evidence of redistribution of wealth from one market to another that levels economic inequality, changing the structure of the economy. Overall, LEACH provides immigrants with a higher wage compared to federal wage and a benefit program that eliminates the amount of out-of-pocket spending, allowing the use of family income alongside financial aid to support future education. It is important to note that LEACH provides a federal jobs guarantee that acts as a transitional period for immigrants to then be able to move towards higher level jobs. This exact combination of welfare does not exist in the country for immigrants today. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Megan, do you need time?
You have 30 seconds. Thank you.
Time there.
Whenever you're ready. Where in the Department of Defense budget will your money be derived from?
My partner will go to that.
Okay. Can you tell me the specific sector of the DoD, their overall budget?
Yeah, I can tell you that Department of Defense Contract Management Program.
That is the specific place that the money is coming from?
Yes.
Okay. And how much does your plan cost?
My partner's going to go into that.
Do you have an estimate?
Yeah, we do, but it's in the second constructive.
Okay. What is the salary you will be providing in your jobs guarantee?
Once again, my partner is going to go into that in the second constructive.
Okay. Are you going to be creating new jobs or providing ones that already exist?
Providing ones that already exist.
Okay. If you were providing ones that already exist, how are you going to combat market distortion?
There is no market distortion, as I've mentioned in...
But if you're providing jobs that already exist,
Right.
are you
So
providing
I
jobs that
mentioned...
are currently
Can I answer this question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've mentioned in the first affirmative constructive that there are private sector companies and feels an extreme lack of workers.
Okay. How are you incentivizing these private companies?
My partner will go into that in a second.
How you're going to incentivize
the
private companies?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What sort of eligibility requirements are you setting for your program?
We mentioned this in the first construction as well. Any low-income immigrants, which is when the family's average income is 200% below the federal poverty level, low-income documented immigrants that fit that description were involuntarily unemployed, which means that they have no job at a force but are actively
Do you have a number for this income?
income?
Like the eligibility, is there a number that you've set if they're making less than this?
14,580, as I mentioned.
14,580? Okay. And what sort of training are you going to provide?
It's going to be gotten to in the second constructive, but there is going to be
So you mentioned language barriers in your constructive, for example, so how are you going to be providing this training? What training?
My partner will go into that.
Okay. Do you know how much this training will cost?
Yes, the numbers are going to be brought in the second constructive.
Okay. And will the private companies be providing this training or the government?
The government,
But
alongside private companies.
they're going to work together?
Yes.
Okay. And can you, all right, thank you.
You need time, Mary?
30 seconds.
All right, it's time here.
Hello and good afternoon, honorable judges, opponents, and spectators. While I applaud the philanthropic nature of the affirmatives plan, I believe that there are a number of logistical issues that make it almost impossible to be properly implemented. To begin, in the United States, if one were to make $18 an hour, and then were to move their salary upwards to $24 an hour, their net income would decrease by $24,000. So, in the affirmative plan, they've assessed that certain employees would receive a new job under a presumably increased salary, although they've refused to disclose exactly what the salary would be. It stands to reason that most immigrants would not wish to take advantage of this program, given that their net income would be very likely to decrease. In fact, their income would have to raise up to $38 an hour from $12 an hour for their net income to increase by a single dollar. This is due to chained welfare programs. If these immigrants are to become ineligible for one program, for example, those receiving TANF, SNAP, and Medicaid are deemed to have met WIC income guidelines. Children receiving TANF and SNAP benefits are deemed eligible for the school lunch program, so on and so forth. If one is to become ineligible for one of these programs, the chain takes effect, and instantly they're ineligible for a large number of programs, meaning that their income would tangibly decrease despite it seeming to move upwards. Beyond this, in 1995, Congress passed the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act of 1995, or the UMRA. This bill mandated that any new program that would offer any kind of welfare to an individual would require a deep, in-depth study of how it would impact the private sector, local governments, tribal governments, and other parties related to the issue. In this plan, there appears to be no such study, nor a timetable laid out for when this would be completed or where this research would be done. Beyond this, it also mandates a large period of time is set aside to establish that all state and local governments are on board with the plan, allow them time to suggest edits to the plan, exempt themselves from the plan, and this time is mandated to be meaningful and timely. It appears in the plan that has been provided today that there is no meaningful and timely period set out to make sure that the plan has sufficient time for these local and tribal governments to take the time to react to this plan. In 1996, the U.S. Congress passed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996. This act did a large number of things to impact the way in which immigrants were often eligible for programs. In it, it mandated that immigrants cannot receive benefits for 5 years after reaching the United States. This plan has not set across that it will take 5 years for new immigrants to receive these benefits, and if it did, that would significantly decrease the effectiveness of this plan. And beyond this, they've also established a number of training programs. But in Prowora's limits, it established it to be eligible for welfare, which many of these immigrants would like to be under these jobs. They must oftentimes be working. Though there is a limit to 20% of the state's individuals on welfare can be being educated to fill the work requirement. But if one were to train and offer almost free education to many of these immigrants in order to become certified for many of these jobs, it would be likely that many of the states would go above the 20% mandate of the limit of people who can be being educated to reach the limit. If this occurs, the federal government is mandated to revoke all welfare funding for the state, creating significant issues not only for immigrant populations, but for an entire state's population. Prowora also mandated that future eligibility criteria could be defined primarily by the states. And this plan tends to target one individual group, but the specific groups within it, for example, whether one would have to be a documented immigrant or things of this sort, could be vastly impacted by the way individual states react, meaning its true effectivity could not actually be measured at a federal level and would not be best executed at a federal level. Beyond this, the usage of existing jobs is a very questionable practice in this example. Creating a jobs program that could allow a number of employees to receive work at a certain salary during times of economic peace versus times of economic instability would be an incredibly difficult estimation to make. Not only in what you would pay these individuals, but how many people you estimate would take advantage of the jobs, what industries the jobs would be in, so on and so forth. Many of the industries they've mentioned require a large amount of certification, again running into the issue of only 20% of those utilizing any welfare can be being educated at a given time in a given state. It creates an issue that is not properly solved. And while the affirmative has hit on potential lack of federal jobs programs that work with immigrants, many states have created their own individual programs in the aftermath of the 1996 Prowora Act that have worked on creating jobs for individuals within their own states. For example, Wisconsin Works, Cal Works, Texas Works, Minnesota Family Investment Program, and a number of other programs. While many of these programs are not idealized for immigrants yet, it is best to leave, as Prowora mandated, it is best to leave the states with a number of these issues as has been set as the precedent in the United States. It's simply unfeasible to establish that this plan, which does not properly work with Prowora's existing guidelines, which steps on the toes of existing state programs, which has created an apparatus that will leave immigrants with a lower income than they could have started with. It states that this program is not logistically feasible. Even such, the number of federal employees that we required, not only to process the jobs working with the federal government, establishing the government infrastructure in the Department of Labor to create this opportunity, beyond and creating the money to do this is had not been brought up in the plan. The funding for the plan has not been brought up a single time. The salaries have not been brought up. This plan, while incredibly vague, has not been addressed its elements that would make it at all logistically possible, even beyond its theoretical impossibility. In the details, in the lack of infrastructure that's currently been laid out, it appears impossible that this plan would actually tangibly improve the lives of individuals throughout the United States. Thank you, and please side with me.
Affirmative duty time.
Raise your hand, please.
Pass 30 seconds here.
Are you aware that when I said my partner is going to address something in affirmative too, does it mean that we're not going to address it in the plan?
I'm quite aware, but it's very difficult to counter a plan when you don't know.
Okay, thank you. Another thing. Are you aware that our immigrants are the immigrants that we're trying to help under the plan that we've presented are qualified under the POR status, which means that they've already been here for 5 years because it means they have a green card.
So your plan only affects immigrants that have been here for 5 years?
Immigrants who are documented, which
Yes, who
means
have
that
been
they've
here
been here for
for 5 years.
because they
Okay,
have-
all right, thank you.
Are you aware that in response to the POR putting restrictions on qualified and non-qualified immigrants for the program, only a few states have chosen to eliminate the 60-month time limit, but several states have announced that they will apply time limits only to adults?
You just referenced you only impact those who have been
No,
here for
I'm
5
asking-
years.
I'm asking you that in your constructive, you brought up the POR Act, and you brought up that states are responsible for taking care of immigrants, that they have programs in place. Are you aware that only a few states have chosen to eliminate the 60-month time limit that
Yes.
POR puts in place? Are you aware that while there is a slight incentive in our plan for private sector corporations, that they don't need much of an incentive because they lack the manpower that we're providing them with the immigrants?
That's an opinion, not a fact.
It's a fact. I have sources.
Keep the questions.
Sorry. Are you aware that our definition of, or the individuals that we're trying to help are 200% below the poverty line, which is $14,580?
Yes.
Are you aware that after the individuals are in this plan and they have been in the plan for 5 years and then transitioned out, they will no longer need welfare programs, and therefore this eliminates the need for welfare programs for immigrants?
You are going to take immigrants over the line where they would be eligible for welfare. If you are going to do that, then that's still having causes issues, but yes, I'm now aware.
Are you aware that when I mentioned a 5-year period, I meant in reference to it will take 5 years for 35% of immigrants to transition out of the program, and not 5 years to put the plan into place?
Yes, I didn't interpret it that way.
That's time. Affirmative duty prep time.
15 seconds. judge, worthy opponents and spectators, my name is Samantha Murthy, and after considering some important remarks from my partner and my opponents, I find it necessary to discuss the logistics crucial in supporting LEASH. The entire preparation to create LEASH will take approximately 1 year starting now. And in order to gain the funds necessary to meet the needs of our program and the people we are looking to serve, we have to look and pull from one of the largest scrutinized areas of our federal budget, the Department of Defense. According to the Government Accountability Office, the Defense Contract Management Program has been deemed as a high-risk program because of its consistent, fraudulent activities and inability to meet goals set by Congress. For LEASH's funding, we will utilize 42% of the $400 billion budget used for the Defense Contract Management Program on the fiscal years, and these funds will be transferred to our plan starting now, and will continue indefinitely. We will, first, create a task force within the DoD establishing a group of 25 government financial and policy advisors who will work to assess and confirm fraudulent activity within the contract management program in order to reallocate these funds into LEASH, and these are the movers. As the amount has already been confirmed, they're just approving the redistribution of funds. This will take approximately 10 months. Within the application process, we will establish a new division within the Department of Labor for LEASH, and we'll have a 40-person team to build a website that does the following. First of all, submitting personal information, including but not limited to proof of low income status, proof of immigration status, such as green card, citizen, refugee, or just overall presenting documentation, special skills for our own information and language proficiency, and their address for us to determine work proximity. We will receive these applications and sort them within each private sector company based on skills after doing a criminal background check for felony convictions. This will be in a 2-month window after the task force. Simultaneously, we will be connecting to private sector employees with a team of 20 policy advisors in the Department of Labor. We'll be contacting companies for jobs that need more employees respective to each state. The policy advisors will later then function as the oversight committee to monitor expectations set for LEASH and companies involved. There will be rolling applications from the website, and the algorithm will sort to private sector companies within 1 month of applicant submission, with salary and benefits accounted for in the budget. And the employee training with compensation will be dependent on a job and additional English lessons if needed. Overall timeline is that there is no foreseeable end to this program. It is up to the employees to see it as a stepping stone for career advancement, and this job will give them a stable income and benefits, but it encourages them to seek better employment afterwards. Yet employees will lose eligibility for their specific position within the program when they reach 200% above the federal poverty level, approximately $43,740, and that will be around the 5-year mark. Projected goals that we see here are the employment rate within low-income immigrants increasing by 10% in the first year and 35% in the first 5 years. That is our substantiality. Now on to cost. Within the Department of Labor, we would spend $3.08 million for the web developers, $1.56 million for the policy advisors, making an annual repetitive total of $4.64 million. However, to fund the task force, we'd use the executive branch's discretionary fund and spend $1.75 million. The task force will not be a repeating cost. It will be just for the first 10 months. The average salary of each qualified immigrant is $24,600 at the starting level. It will be then indexed to inflation and raises afterwards. That is just a base value. And this will be, there will be an average training cost of $1,252 per immigrant as well. And they will also receive a benefits package consisting of a retirement plan, paid medical leave, and single coverage health insurance totaling $8,411, making one person $34,263. When the cost per person is multiplied by 4.9 million, the maximum population in question, the estimated cost, including DOL and DoD costs, is $167.9 billion. We would also set aside a $2 billion discretionary fund, which will cover marketing costs, making a total of $169.9 billion covered by the DoD and $1.75 million from the executive branch. We also hope to work with the Department of Treasury and Health and Human Services to ensure the employment rate increase as projected and ensure the fact that fiscal redistribution operates effectively within the appropriate sectors. Now I will move on to addressing some of the points that the negative team has brought up in this debate. When the negative team mentions the fact that having a federal jobs guarantee will take away their access to programs such as TANF and SNAP and of that sort, we have to take into account that having a higher income and having a more stable standard of living, including health benefits and etc., from our plan is a higher standard of living where they won't, perpetually they will not need to use federal welfare programs because they are being provided healthcare services through our plan, and they will no longer have a need to do it because their money will grow and eventually they'll be lifted out of the status. We have to look at this as a chain reaction for fiscal redistribution. Again, we have to say that our immigrants do fall under the qualified category of pro rata, whereas they are all green card holders or citizens, refugees, they all fall under the qualified status. Additionally, we have to account the fact that it takes multiple years to get a green card, meaning that it will be 5 years at a minimum, and we are looking at people who have been here for 5 years as well. We also have to look at the fact that within pro rata, as the restrictions were placed against the specific population, states really weren't doing much, as only a few states, as mentioned in the cross-examination, were limited in this case. And this is an example of lack of state intervention, because even though the federal government has placed such restrictive policies on immigrant welfare benefits, we seem to think that the states can do more, or they're doing enough. But the reality is that they're not. They refuse to take participation within removing the restrictions faced by the federal government. And for the negative team to bring that up as an example is a lack of relevance in this case. Additionally, we have to take into account that the status quo, existing welfare policies, especially TAN, which is supposed to be giving supplemental income to others, it has, in fact, been perpetuating deep poverty even further. Additionally, job programs right now, job training programs right now in America have actually not been doing anything, because the fact is, training is just training. You have to be including work experience as well. And even though the status quo brings up many instances of providing training to assure employment within immigrants, employment levels have not changed due to those programs, and the status quo is the status quo. And that is why a federal jobs guarantee is needed. In and of itself, a federal jobs guarantee is a federal jobs guarantee. So with our program, these immigrants are guaranteed to have a future of success and eventually fulfilling themselves and getting out of cyclical inequality that has been put into place due to their existing discrimination that they face at this time. We also have to acknowledge the fact that these companies are already incentivized to get into this program, because the fact is, the companies that we're looking at, they need the manpower, and we are essentially doing all the work for them. As we are providing the funding, we are providing the manpower, and all they need to do is simply facilitate. We have been giving them everything, and this in and of itself is an incentive, along with the marketing costs that will occur to get immigrants within this program as well and bring the manpower to them. Within our plan as a whole, we see solvency here as we are perpetuating to lift out of the cycle of inequality that a current status quo is facing them in. And a lack of federal jobs guarantee program catered towards this specific community is seen with the inherency of the situation, and the harms of not doing this plan perpetuate these immigrants into further discrimination in the workforce or even at home because of the low standard of living that they already face, and they'll continue to stay there, and how is America going to grow as a nation? And ultimately, this is topical due to the fiscally redistributed policies that we're seeing here from allocating one fund from a wealthy area to an area of low income. Thank you for your time. Please have a good one.
More time?
How many people at any given time do you believe will be taking advantage of your training apparatus?
training apparatus, it's a federal jobs guarantee, it's training and then work experience, but we project that due to the marketing cost, obviously not a full 4.9 million will come at once, rather it will be within quarter to half increments.
What is a specific number, your estimate of how many people at the beginning of the program, within the first, we'll say 6 months, will take advantage of your training apparatus?
We cannot provide those projections.
Thank you. What income do you believe puts one above the limit for the welfare reference in the Illinois Policy Institute study?
Can you repeat your question?
What income do you believe puts you at a point where you are no longer eligible for welfare according to the previous data that was referenced in the past cross?
Which Illinois policy study?
The Illinois Policy Institute study referenced in the first negative, about the income raising but actually lowering because of ineligibility for welfare programs. It was referenced then in the cross that the income would raise so much they would no longer be eligible for these programs. What is the income you believe makes them no longer eligible for these programs?
Well, we're looking at like our maximum eligibility for the program as $43,108.
Okay, thank you.
2% of the federal poverty level.
Thank you. What is the full timeline for implementation?
We said that it would take 1 fiscal year to do,
One fiscal year, thank you.
do the entire preparation for
Thank
this.
you. In times of economic turmoil, when jobs are often difficult to create, especially for the private sector, how would this program fully operate?
A guarantee is a guarantee. We are contracting these out to companies that need the manpower. They are very desperate to look for people in their workforce. In fact, I can provide you a statistic for that. However, within these companies that are looking for it, we will make sure within the contracted timeline that they get the employees within the timeline that they request, and the employees will get the pay that they get afterwards.
How can you estimate the funding in a time of turmoil when more immigrants would be looking for assistance from this program? How do you estimate the increase in the budget that would be necessary? How do you provide that deficit?
Well, the good part about this is the fact that we know that not all 4.9 million immigrants are going to come at once, and the fact that there's an eligibility limit will counterbalance this, so that we'll have enough room to give.
Thank you. In a time of turmoil, it would stand to reason that more people will be below your limit. In a time when more people than expected are utilizing your program because of economic turmoil, how would you create more money for more jobs?
Well, then we would reestablish the task force again. The task force is there to look at it again. And we have discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is a really big, vital part of this, and $2 billion that we have included in there will be used for any spending that would be necessary.
Time? Time yet?
Good afternoon, Honorable Judge, worthy opponents, fellow teammates. My name is Samya Kumaran and I'm N2. Today, the affirmative team presents us with a plan to provide a jobs guarantee to low-income immigrants. And while I applaud the morality of their plan, there are many flaws in the efficiency and applicancy of their plan that deem it impossible to implement. First, I would like to begin by addressing the Illinois Policy Institute that was recently brought up in the cross. The affirmative one of the affirmative's key points in the plan is that they're going to apply it over a 5-year timeline so that they can bring low-income immigrants out of the poverty line, therefore rendering them who wouldn't need welfare programs. However, in order to do this, you would need to provide immigrants, you bring them up to a point where they're over $43,680. And the affirmative team stated that their starting salary is $24,600. Even if you increase this based on inflation, over time, a $24,600 starting salary, even if you increase it, will never put low-income immigrants over the welfare gap. Therefore, the solvency aspect is not being addressed here because these low-income immigrants are still going to need welfare, whether they, even if they are being put at a point where they're being paid $24,600. Therefore, they will not truly be brought out of poverty. Additionally, in the very early crosses, N1's constructive brought up the UMRA, and the affirmative team did not address the UMRA. The UMRA is the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act, and while the affirmative team gave a time period in order for infrastructural processes, they did not take into account how the jobs that they are being provided into the population of immigrants in the poverty line is going to affect the current market at hand. The UMRA also requires at certain points to consider the effects of not only overall how it would affect our general economy, but also how it would affect state economies and local economies if you are providing jobs that already exist and sectioning them off for a program that would give it to low-income immigrants. Additionally, the affirmative team stated that no real incentive needs to be given as they are providing the manual labor for many private companies. However, if the private sector is the one who is providing these jobs, these private companies can go overseas at any time. There is no actual guarantee that the affirmative team is going to retain these private companies. Even if they're being provided manual labor, if manual labor is the only incentive being provided to private companies, this manual labor can easily be found in any other country. Any other country that has low income individuals who are in need of jobs will be easily be able to attain these jobs if these private companies simply go overseas. If no other incentive is being provided other than simply the fact that we are giving you people to do your manual labor, for example, then this is not a real incentive at all, because the definition of an incentive is to provide something that they wouldn't already have. However, if they go overseas, they would easily be able to find this manual labor, and therefore these private companies are not at all required to cooperate with the affirmative's plan, and as the affirmative plan defined, these jobs are not actually being provided by the federal government. They are contracting private companies to do this. And if these private companies go overseas, they are left with no jobs to provide, rendering their plan useless. Additionally, the affirmative team presented a total cost of $169.9 billion. However, when taking this money into consideration, the affirmative team also stated that over the 5-year timeline, they're going to bring low-income immigrants under the poverty line to a point where they wouldn't need welfare anymore. $169.9 billion is nowhere near enough to bring these immigrants to a point where they would be gaining at least, if not more than, $43,680 to not require welfare anymore. As I stated, the salary mentioned by the affirmative team does not put low-income immigrants at a point where they wouldn't need welfare. Therefore, they would still require this welfare, and not only will the solvency not be achieved, this money would also be not be enough in order to achieve this. My partner also mentioned in the recent cross that in times of economic turmoil, more people will be looking, more immigrants who are now low income, if in economic turmoil they're making less, will be looking for these jobs. However, the affirmative team did not take into consideration that there will be points in time where more people are going to require access and benefits from their program, and they simply stated that the current estimate can be used to section off a specific demographic who would require their plan, thus the funding would be sufficient. However, this funding will be quickly rendered insufficient if in times of economic turmoil, more people actually require these jobs. Additionally, I would like to address that the affirmative team said that part of the online infrastructure that they have to match low-income immigrants to jobs is based on skill. However, many low-income immigrants who are unable to gain access to a job is because they do not have the skill in the first place. Therefore, if you match them according to their skills, you would be unable to match them to most private jobs since they require a lot of specific skill. Additionally, in my very first cross, I asked what sort of training will be provided, and the only actual specific training that the affirmative team mentioned in both constructives was regarding to language. However, there is a lot more training that needs to go into in order to prepare low-income immigrants to work in the private industry. Additionally, as I stated, if they were to be taught this manual labor skills, they are still only offering manual labor to these private companies, and these private companies are going to need a lot more incentive than simply manual labor in order to be contracted with the affirmative team. To reiterate, the UMRA was not taken into account when it was mentioned in N1's constructive, and this renders their plan impossible to implement because the UMRA takes into account the way that providing, for example, existing jobs to a specific demographic would affect the market. For example, these private jobs would no longer be available to those who do not qualify for the affirmative team's program, and therefore they would lose access to these jobs. Additionally, although the affirmative team took into account many of the things that A1 mentioned, they failed to take into consideration UMRA, among additional things. Thank you, and please sign the negative.
30. Sign there.
Can you clarify by the UMRA what you were trying to say with that?
The UMRA is the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act of 1995.
And what words your point you were trying to make?
It takes into consideration the economic disturbances and changes that would make if you were providing, for example, existing jobs.
Thank you. So, are you aware of the fact that we're looking at fields that need more manpower?
Yes, I'm talking about existing jobs.
Are you aware of the fact that taking away the money from the defense department will stimulate a shift in the curve and a shift from that part of the market to this part of the market?
That is not what I was referring to. I was referring to the fact that people would lose access to these jobs, and that is market distortion.
So, are you aware of the fact that people are not losing access, rather the private contractors are gaining the people? There's no taking jobs away from people?
But you are providing existing jobs, no?
But are you aware of the fact that we're not taking jobs away from people? It's the opening for the job is there, but they need the people still. So,
Can you phrase it as a question?
are you aware of the fact that the jobs that we are looking at in the Seattle Times, they have the openings, but they are not getting the people for it? Therefore, it will not be as much of a problem as you're discussing?
Yes, but I also stated they have no incentive to do this.
Okay, are you aware of the fact that going overseas to get such jobs actually requires the companies to pay them rather than having the federal government pay them? So therefore, the federal government is getting an incentive through the paying of these jobs?
They are paying private companies.
Yes, are you aware of the fact that as per our definition of federal jobs guarantee, it is a government-funded program? So the funding is coming from the government?
Yes, but when this funding isn't sufficient, as I stated, 169.9 is not
Right.
sufficient, these private companies would lose that incentive too.
All right, thank you. Are you aware of the fact that the salary that we were looking at was the base salary, that they would be indexed to raises?
Yes, but you said according to inflation.
We said both.
You did not provide me a number that would lead me to make a conclusion that it would put them over $43,000. An increase does not necessarily mean double their salary.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Why are you considering that all immigrants have no skill, like existing skill?
I did not consider that. I considered the low-income immigrants who may not have skill.
All right, thank you. Are you aware of the fact that the skill part was for our own information? It was more like a side factor because we are providing training anyways.
What is your question?
I'm asking if you're aware of that fact.
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay, are you aware of the fact that we're not just giving lessons for English proficiency, which is a prominent issue, we're also giving lessons for the job that they're attending, respective to the job's training timeline? As we said in the second instructive.
I'm aware.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have a timer?
It should be around time. Never went off, I'm sorry. Do you have one more question? Because that would be around time.
Okay. No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Negative D. You have 2 minutes of prep left. Running time.
Hello, worthy opponents, judge, spectators. Throughout this debate, a number of points have been discussed about how this plan, for numerous reasons, is almost impossible to properly execute. Then the last cross, it was referenced that the immigrants would not submit their current training status for a job assignment. This is, as has been established previously, logically not possible. If you were to then re-provide this training to each and every individual, you would go above the 20% limit for a state on how many people can be trained at one time under a welfare program. It is very straightforward. Poor establishes no more than 20%. And if you go above that number, all of the state's welfare funding will be revoked. All of it. That is not only going to ruin immigrants, but ruin every poor individual in a given state, due to the fact that this program does not even consider the training of an individual in assigning them a job. Even beyond this, they've established that they will take immigrants above the poverty line using this program, but this simply does not make sense. If one was living on $14,000 per year, which is below the cost of living, they would presumably need money short term. Asking them to then take the short-term loss of a $24,000 salary and lowering their income by a significant amount is not a fair ask of these individuals. It puts them in a position that is almost impossible for them to climb out of while in debt and actively lowering their own salary. And even once they escape, their salary is not significantly higher than when it started. It is merely not reliant on government subsidies. This is not helping immigrants, this is helping the government. Even beyond this, there has been no consideration of the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act and its necessities to allow individual governments to create exemptions. Within the one-year timetable, there were a number of things considered. For example, the audit and collecting money that would presumably exist. It was not considered that there needs to be meaningful and timely amounts of time provided to each and every single area across the United States to make their own changes and considerations with this law. This is simply not considered in a one-year timetable. Given that they may not even have the money on hand until the end of the timetable to create the plan, you realistically could not ask a state to even propose changes to the plan before the timetable ends, meaning that UMRA would not be abided by this plan. Even beyond this, they've argued that there is an article proving that these jobs need filling and cannot be currently filled, and therefore the government could easily fill them. This is, though, not an argument. In times of crisis, as has been mentioned many times throughout this debate, these jobs do not exist. They simply do not. Jobs that are open now, or in a time of economic stability, may not exist many times. For example, in 2009, unemployment was at 9.6%. It is not realistic to expect that you could have a significant number of jobs open at 9.6% unemployment that just can't be filled with individuals. These jobs that they claim exist in times of peace may not exist in many times throughout the economy. So as a whole, it is not realistic to expect that programs that would ruin a state's welfare apparatus and destroy the finances of immigrants, it is not realistic to expect that this would help them at all, that this fiscal redistribution would even occur. Immigrants' salaries will not go up. This is trampling upon precedent. Thank you, and please side with the negative.
Affirmative, you have 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Minute 30 left. Minute 30, you have a minute 30 left in your time.
Okay. Thank you.
Not so. That's time there.
Thank you, Honorable Judge, worthy opponents and spectators. After considering some of the points the negative team has brought up throughout this debate, I'd like to reiterate some of the things that have happened. First of all, I want to reiterate the math that went into going into this budget, because we have to consider that the affirmative team has considered the maximum population involved. We have considered the full extent of the budget, as we have repeated in various occasions. For example, we are considering 4.9 million multiplied by each person is 167.9 billion. We are considering 70K per task force agent times 25 is 1.75 million, 77K per WAC developer times 40 is 3.08 million, 78K per policy advisor times 20 is 1.56 million. This becomes a 4.64 million total for the DOL and 1.75 million total for the DOD. Now, the negative team keeps arguing that the budget is not enough, but the fact is we have considered everything in the budget. We're getting the maximum amount of the budget. In reality, we may not even use such an amount of the budget, but we are prepared for an influx of immigrants. We are prepared for a decrease of immigrants. The reality is the affirmative plan is prepared for everything at once. And we have to consider that although the affirmative team cannot provide a projection for the amount of people coming in at once, it is almost impossible to do so. We are prepared for everyone that is coming to take advantage of the benefits of our plan. Now, consider the fact that we have seen the entire maximum population in this. The negative team has brought up the fact that the incentive is not enough and that companies might go overseas. However, as we said within the jobs that we're considering, these are service-based jobs. Service-based jobs requires people in the local area, and that is why the manpower that is needed within our plan is going to be successful for this as well. Additionally, as we said in AF1, the Seattle Times has given such a list of jobs, and the fact is that, according to the University of Utah that we have discussed in multiple times, the government is funding this. The government is funding this, and that in and of itself is an incentive, because to go overseas and procure multiple other people for a service-based job is not feasible, because we are providing the money that is necessary for this as well. Again, when considering current training status, not only are we providing lessons with the English proficiency, which is a major part of their inability to gain jobs, we are also providing the actual training involved in this process. The actual training involved in this process ultimately makes this program a stepping stone for the future, and the negative team has failed to grasp that. The concern of this program is not for the success of the immigrants to end here. It is for them to get their certification, get a stable income and benefits, and move on to a better high-quality job. The negative team keeps on saying that we are lowering their income. However, isn't going from $14,000 to $24,000 a significant increase? Additionally, these immigrants have no existing income because they are unemployed, as well as the fact that they are low income. An increase is an increase, eventually. Also, how is this helping the government, as the negative team brings up? We are, in fact, using our own money for this as well.
And the negative team, once again, I want to reiterate, the states have no welfare apparatus because of, as we've seen, they have a lack of intervention within such programs. And we mentioned that in the second constructive as well. Also, the negative team keeps on mentioning times of crisis. This is a hypothetical, and they have not provided evidence to do so, while we have provided the fact that there is a major employment, need for employment as per the Seattle Times. The task force, the money exists. Again, we want to reiterate the money for this program exists, the maximum amount of money exists, and the task force is there as levers for the money. One more time, we would like to reiterate that even though less than 20% of the population for the poverty line will lead the states to not get funded, isn't that what we want? As a solvency of this program, we want the poverty rate to decrease. We want the increase in employment within our community. So as a result, we need to side with the affirmative team's plan. Thank you.
So our judges are going to deliberate for a moment and talk about this debate, and we can all hang tight for the results. Okay, let me see if I can.
All right, so we'll, just like any debate, we'll talk through strengths, areas that we identified that maybe one team did better and those type of things. But we'll start with commendations, I guess, for either side. So you want to do commendations? You do.
And I'll be the
Tipping
head.
points. Yeah. I mean, I'll do that. I'll just you have to. So commendations. So for the affirmative side, we thought your plan was incredibly complete. Every aspect was just thoroughly thought through. Itemized list of budgeting, the timeline of it. It was one of those plans where it's like, man, there's not a whole lot of weaknesses just in the fact that it's so thoroughly thought through. We also thought you guys did an incredible job of working in your evidence, and it wasn't like a disruption to the flow of the plan, that we understood and knew exactly where your information was coming from, and the strength of the evidence itself. And then also establishing the deficiency of the status quo. So the need for this plan as something that, the status quo is not doing a significant enough job in this capacity. As far as the negative, commendations for you all. We thought you guys did, your versatility in the information that you presented to combat points was really amazing. You were very versed in historical context, and the events and the different legislature that you were able to pull out to combat some of the points was incredibly extensive. We also thought on both ends, solid deliveries. I mean, there wasn't a weakness in delivery on both ends. That's just something for both of you. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading my own. So even in the language when you were proposing, the problems, it was the language that you even used. So it's impossible to properly execute, or different things like that. Not that this is impossible, but the methods in which you presented and the language that you used to say the ways in which you were going about things, that type of language was very convincing. So kudos to you guys for that. Those are the commendations I had.
Okay, so with two very nuanced, evenly matched teams, there still has to be a winner. So the tipping points for us were that the negative team, you did convincingly argue that the affirmative team dropped some of your contentions and didn't have a solid response to your UMRA concern. And we also thought that the negative team was more efficient in using the cross-examination to exploit weaknesses in the other side, as opposed to just using that time to kind of reiterate, your own talking points. So really, that was the knife edge that this came down to. And so the champion this year is the negative team.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Good job. Guys, take care.
It was really nice. Yeah.
So our Hightstown